From the halls of a South Carolina middle school to commanding positions in the United States Navy, and now transforming lives as a sought-after coach, some journeys are too powerful to keep to yourself. Welcome to Voice for Valor, where today we're joined by Shikina Tellis, a woman who turned 26 years of naval leadership into a mission to help others navigate their own uncharted waters. In the military, finding your bearings can mean the difference between mission success and failure. But what happens when the mission becomes finding yourself? After decades of service, how do you rediscover who you are beyond the uniform? Shikina faced these questions head on and emerged with insights that have transformed not just her life, but the lives of countless professionals and veterans searching for harmony between their work and their deeper purpose. From leadership challenges as a woman in predominantly male spaces, to the emotional roller coaster of retirement, to building a coaching empire, Shikina holds nothing back in today's conversation. Whether you're in uniform, transitioning to civilian life, or simply seeking a more purposeful path forward, the next 45 minutes will equip you with battle-tested wisdom from someone who's walked the journey before you. This is Voice for Valor. I'm your host, Mike Camoris, and we're about to deep dive with Shikina Tellis. Well, welcome everybody to the Voice for Valor podcast. Today I have Shikina Tellis, and it's a small world because Charles and I went to school together back in 2019, 2020. And I know that we briefly met at the embassy event while we were students at Eisenhower. But I am just so honored to have you here today to find out more about your background and what you're doing for veterans. So welcome to the show. Thank you so much.
No, thank you. I think what you're doing is amazing, of course, because you all served. So we definitely have that in common. But then to see how you're translating that into life after, it's definitely an amazing thing. And I definitely wanted to be a part of it. So thank you for honoring me and allowing me to be here.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much. Well, first off, just for our listeners, please take us back to Aiken, South Carolina. What was it like growing up there? And were there any early influences that shaped your path towards military service?
Wow, that's a great question. You know, as a coach, I'm always, when I hear a great question, like, ooh. So as I tackle that question, I would say the big thing that comes up for me is just the importance of community. Like you said, coming from Aiken, South Carolina, a small community. And I come from a blended family. So the oldest on my maternal side of the family, but then on my my biological paternal side, I'm the youngest. So definitely having a lot of community, a lot of support, whether it be relatives or my church family, were very influential in my life. And I would say a big person that influenced my military, going into the military, it's funny because I call it my drill team moment. When I was a 14-year-old, we were in middle school. The NJROTC came and their drill team did an exhibition drill for us during one of our pep rallies. And as a 14-year-old, that was something that really stuck out for me. I didn't know how it was going to be, but I knew that I wanted to do that. And so as I entered high school after seeing the drill team come and do that, knowing that that's what I wanted to do, what I found out when I got to high school was that the naval science instructor who led the program, he was just this larger than life human being. Of course, he was retired naval officer, 06. And he just, when he saw the potential that I had in me, and the fact that I wanted to be on the drill team at the time, that was, in my field of view, he helped me do everything I needed to in order to go from, being that seaman recruit in the NJROTC program to ultimately being the XO and being the leader of a mostly male drill team. And so that was my entry point. And so from there, he helped to mold and shape me and open doors for me, which ultimately led into me coming into the Navy.
Wow, 14 years old. So the Navy comes and gives you this drill team exposition. If it would have been Army, if it would have been Air Force, would that made a difference? Do you think it was the Navy at 14 that made that difference?
I would say, I wouldn't necessarily say the Navy, although I love my Navy family, I love my Navy experience. But I would say just looking at the discipline and the structure and just the just seeing them perform, even hearing, I can still hear it now as you and I are talking. I can still hear them when they were, marching through the gymnasium, actually executing their routine. And something about that, even as I describe it to you right now, it just has me on the inside just clapping, applauding, because that was something that stuck out for me. So I think if Army had come and I don't know, maybe it would have been the same, maybe not, but it was Navy. And I really, it still resonates with me to this day.
How often, or not how often, how recently after high school did you join the Navy? What was that process like?
Oh, great question. So for me, once I graduated, so before I graduated, in fact, I was almost late for my graduation because I was at the MEP station in Columbia, or Fort Jackson rather, actually, because I did a delayed entry program. And so what happened is I knew that ultimately I was going to go through a program. It was at the time called Boost, Broaden the Opportunity for Officer Selection and Training, which is now Seaman to Admiral. It's the Navy program, but then it was Boost. So I knew that once I graduated, I would be going to basic training. So I actually did go through basic training in Orlando, Florida. And from basic training, I went out and I graduated. I was a seaman in the Navy because of the NJROTC time. I was in it for 4 years. And once I graduated, went to basic training, from there, they sent me off to Boost School, which at the time was out in San Diego, California. And then from there, of course, led to me getting an ROTC scholarship. So for college, I am a Gamecock, a USC Columbia Gamecock alumni. So from Boost, I went off to USC Columbia to their ROTC unit, and that's ultimately where I got my commission.
You're the first Navy person I've met or I've interviewed that's gone through basic training. I know what the Air Force is like. I know what the Army is like. What is Navy basic training like?
Oh, and that was a while ago, so I'm sure some things have changed since then.
It's much kinder and gentler now. There's no more hazing. They get timeouts. It's completely changed since our time.
I'm definitely sure it's different. But I would say big things. I realized that overall they were trying to help us to become a team. To break out of that, it's me and thinking about yourself and just thinking about the team and the fact that whatever you bring to the team is going to either make the team better or it may do some things that pose some challenges for the team. Ultimately realizing that, those are your battle buddies. So you want to do everything you can that supports your battle buddies and the team at large. So yeah, there were times of them, mentally breaking you down only to build you up, but all in the, I guess, with a mindset that ultimately you came here as a single individual. We're going to mold you into a team, and then we're going to send you out to do great things. So yeah, so it was 8 weeks of fun, both mental breakdown, building of community and relationships, and just learning the Navy, the Navy way of life.
Thank you for talking about breaking people down. I think that the military gets this negative connotation of hazing and yelling and screaming, but what we've realized through time and time again is that when you break folks down and build them back up as a team, it develops a cultural bond that's unbreakable. And I don't know why more organizations don't do something similar.
That's true. And as you say it, I'm looking to the word and I'm like, oh, it's essentially what it is them breaking you down. But I think if I had to take that back and reword it a different way, I would say they help you to get out of thinking about me and I and more about we and how far we can go. And so, yeah, I definitely like to look at it. They help you break that mindset of only thinking about yourself.
Yeah, I've read multiple industry-related books, and it's all about, hey, develop this level of knowledge that makes you valuable to the point where they don't want to get rid of you. You need to be invaluable to the organization. And I think, but that's such a selfish way of thinking. I would rather share that knowledge and bring the whole organization together. But it's just a different mindset. I wish that military professional sports mindset was more I don't know what the term I'm looking for, but prevalent in industry. So while you're at the University of South Carolina, what made you choose a surface warfare officer? Right, these are things that I learned about the Navy as well. You have like the aviation path, you have kind of like the nuclear path, the surface warfare officer path. Can you explain that to our audience?
Sure. I'll do my best. And so I would say at the time when I went through the surface warfare officers, which are your ship drivers. So predominantly, yes, their job is to lead people, but it's also ultimately to command the warships that you see out on the water. And so basically they're preparing you for that, getting ready to do that. And at the time, the reason why surface warfare was my option is because coming out of NROTC at the time, you had to go what they would call unrestricted line, which means they could kind of put you anywhere, but of course within your field. So that was things like surface warfare officers, which are your ship drivers, plus your pilots, you have your nuclear path. And for me, the thing that really appealed to me wasn't something that was available to me. So the supply community is actually what really appealed to me. But at the time, coming out of an ROTC program, they were not. Those were called restricted lines. So things like Supply Corps, Intel, some of those ones that, those were considered restricted lines. So you couldn't go those, you had to go unrestricted line, which was surface warfare, Intel, nuclear. So that's why I chose surface warfare. So it's kind of like, that's what they chose for me, because what I really wanted wasn't available to me at the time.
From a leadership perspective, I did not realize until I got to know more about the Navy that surface warfare officer job, you learn everything about the ship, right? I mean, you guys learn the nuts and bolts of everything. So you truly understand how the entire machine works. Am I right?
Yeah, I would say, ultimately they're training you to be the commanding officer. I only did 2 years, so I completed 2 years in the program because ultimately I wanted to be a supply corps officer. And I'm so thankful to God because the stars did align and I was able to do that. So I only spent the first 2 years. And in that time, of course, you're learning, I was a communications officer. So learning everything about how we communicate off the ship, as well as the internal communication systems. And so my folks, your troops or your sailors, they're the ones who really do the heavy lifting, and you're there to kind of manage them through that process, make sure they have the tools and resources needed in order to complete their jobs. But ultimately, yes, as a surface warfare officer, once you become a commanding officer, you know a lot about the ship because you've been that engineering officer, down there learning what makes the ship go, whether it's an engine or, a turbine or pumps or, you've done tours and you've learned about that, or the communication suite, how that all works, and where to get help when it's not working. So once you get to be the commanding officer, I would say even the executive officer, you do know a lot of the nuts and the bolts. And if you don't know the details, you have subject matter experts, right? Those sailors, your enlisted sailors that are actually doing the wrench turning and the heavy lifting. You know how to go out and get the support that they need in order to help you move forward and make sure the ship is operational.
How many personnel were on the ships that you served on?
Oh, good question. You're making me go back now. So let me see. So I was on 2 oilers, and I was on a DDG, the small ships.
What does DDG stand for? What is that?
I'm sorry. So that's a guided missile destroyer.
Oh, okay.
And then the oilers, the AOEs, they have, the ones I was on had ammunition. We carried ammunition, fuel, and some limited amounts of food. And so on the oilers, our complement was about, you're dating me as you make me try to remember I want to say it was about maybe 600 or 700.
Oh, okay. Wow,
was our complement. And then on the destroyer, it was like 250 or something like that. The destroyers are much smaller complement.
I think about the Navy when you go out to sea is it's like a giant Amazon distribution center. You have your fuel ships, you have your destroyer ships, you have the aircraft carrier, you have all these different pieces moving out into the ocean together. Is that what led you to supply? Why did you want to become a supply officer?
Great question. I would say for me, I try to begin with the end in mind. And so for me, the reason why I chose that was because I knew that after the military, because I knew there would be a life after, I just didn't know when, but I wanted to do something that would prepare me to have a wide range of things I could do after the military. And so as surface warfare officer, I thought was great. You learn how to operate the ship, you're learning everything about it, and you're learning to manage people. With supply, not only do I learn to manage people, but I'm also learning how to get the tools, food, their quality of life things, everything that they need to sustain that ship. And so to me, that was a tool that you could easily translate into the civilian sector. And so that was one of the driving factors for me why I chose supply, because I looked at what I could do with that knowledge after my military service.
During your service, what was it like to be a woman in leadership positions in the Navy? What unique challenges did you face?
So definitely, I would say you are always in the minority. And so going into those spaces and just kind of filling them out and figuring out how you, like you said, yes, you happen to be a woman, right? But how you navigate those spaces knowing that you happen to be a woman, although people see that you're a woman first, you're a naval officer. So the goal is for you to emulate that and to march forward in that. It just so happens that you're a woman. And although you go in with that mindset, sometimes the people and the systems and processes don't support that. So I would say definitely going in, and when there was an issue, knowing that you could talk to someone if you needed to, knowing that was helpful. Some tours were a little tougher than others, but definitely I would say having a community. So not only my community on my ship, but sometimes the community outside of the ship, other officers that were going through the same thing you were. So whether that was me as a surface warfare officer and tapping into my surface warfare officer community shipmates, or definitely as a supply officer, tapping into the other supply officers that were also out on the ships around me, like you talked about them going out together, the battle group, us going out, us definitely tapping into one another and being able to talk to one another about what was happening, both from being a female, being an African American, and definitely just being supply corps, because supply wasn't sexy. However, it was always something that was needed. And without it, the ship wouldn't go where it needed to go, right? Because you can only go so far. Once you get fueled or once you have parts, something breaks, I'll stop, right? Because you got to get it fixed. So supply was important, but most people didn't know that it was important until it wasn't working right or something was broken. So you were a strategic thinker, because when I was a young captain, or I guess ensign or lieutenant in your capacity, I took supply and these things for granted. It took me further along in my career when I had to manage larger organizations to realize how important that was. So good on you for developing that skill set at a young age. I'm envious that you cracked the code well before I did. And I won't say cracking the code, but what I will say though is, remember, I started out as a surface warfare officer. So like you said, I was like you. I'm like, wow, what do they do? Who are they, right?
Yeah.
But realizing it was something I want to do, but not understanding it at that time. So those first 2 years that I was a surface warfare officer, I actually worked closely with supply, but also in the back of my mind, I was like, well, what's so important about supply? And then what I learned when I was actually in the supply corps, as a member of the supply corps, was just how invaluable and important supply was. I think one thing I would always tell my sailors was that no matter what happens on this ship, at some point, it's in supply's hand. So whether we're bringing it on the ship, whether we're disposing of it, whether we're managing the parts, whether we're feeding, whatever happens on the ship, at some point, it's in supply's hands.
So as a former supply officer, what we're dealing with currently in the political environment with tariffs and trade wars, you as a supply officer, can you describe the impact that would have on your mission as out in the battle group?
Oh, that's a good question.
Because the general public just doesn't see it. They just think of, tariffs are good and we're gonna win this trade war and this is gonna be great. But you being behind the scenes and seeing actually how supply chains work, can you describe the difficulty that you would be facing?
Well, definitely, I guess I'm thinking, and it's been a minute since I've been, on the ship and at sea. So, but if I had to talk about it, I would say I definitely see it from whenever we do port visits and things of that nature, just looking at just how expensive those would definitely be nowadays as we, navigate the political environment that's occurring. I could definitely see those costs being increased significantly, depending on what it was, where we're going, what we were doing. So I see it from that standpoint. I'm thinking from a contract management standpoint as well, that you'd be feeling it as well, whether you're a contract to get some part that you need. Maybe it's hard to get that part and they have to go out and do a contract for it. I could definitely see there being an increase in fees. So definitely seeing it, I guess, impacting the community as a whole. But that's how I kind of think that it would impact that.
I have a tremendous respect for the Navy. I didn't know much about them until further along in my career. And then now, when I came to the realization that, you guys protect worldwide commerce. You guys protect the seas for the freedom of trade. And a lot of people think of the service as just, fight. Right now we're talking about lethality and all these terms of violence. But in reality, you guys are the supply chain logistics masters of the world, of the seas. And I just don't think the general public realizes how important you are to the protection of free trade. Look at the Red Sea right now with the Houthi attacks. That is just increasing the costs of transportation to and from to Egypt, and it's remarkable how little that information is provided to the general public.
That's true. And I guess also thinking about, the military, it itself is not a business. So you're not looking at it, in the sense that a corporation would. However, like you said, if you're on the outside looking in, you might think of it differently. And you might think, yeah, we are looking at it that way. And that's not the case, right? We have a mission that we have to accomplish. And we accomplish it. Yes, we have rules, we have regulations, we have laws that facilitate that. But it looks different than it does for, your corporation. That's a point.
So when you're out at sea, how long is a typical mission out at sea?
I guess it depends, because of course before you work up to a deployment, right? And so that you could be gone anywhere from 6 to 9 months. But in between that, you're doing workup. So you're getting the ship ready, you're taking it out and kicking the tires and making sure, if you need to go full power, that you can go full power. So you're testing, you're trying to break it actually. And you go out and you do different things to work it up mechanically. You also do things to work it up operationally. So your team's working together, and should things happen, because things will happen, right? Being able to recover from that, whether it's a fire on board or you name it, but you're doing all the training. And so sometimes you could be out for 2 weeks, sometimes you could be out. This is on top of what you're ultimately working up to, which is that deployment, which could be 6 to 9 months typically. So it all depends.
So 26 years of naval service. I know when I was preparing for my retirement, I started that process about a year out, and it was just an emotional roller coaster for me. What emotions were you experiencing as you prepared for this major life transition?
That is a great question. I would say for me, it was number one, figuring out when I was ready to go, right? When I was ready to go was the big one. And just, trying to figure out, who am I? I've been doing this thing for 26 years. And like you and I talked about, it's something I've been preparing for since I was 14. So, and now to try to figure out, who am I outside of what I've been doing? And I don't know the word for that, but I just know for me, it was something that had me, of course, I was scared and I was nervous of the uncertainty. But then I was also, I guess, trying to figure out who I was and what was important or what my values were. The military, of course, we have our core values, but it's like, okay, what are my personal values and how do I express those? And how do I walk into a career that is aligned with my personal values? So yeah, I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, I think of it, for me, I think of it as, my goodness, this has been my purpose. This has been my culture. I was so fearful of retiring and not having that support network anymore. Those people that understand where you're coming from, those people that understand what your goals and your values are. That was a tumultuous time for me. And so I'm so thankful of the place I landed, because I work with a bunch of retired military folks and we still have that purpose-driven life, that purpose-driven mission, and I thoroughly enjoy it. Was there a pivotal moment during this retirement process that led you towards your new career in life coaching?
Good question. So I would say the answer is yes. I do want to circle back a minute though to kind of add to what we were talking about as I was looking at the transition process. And it's gone now. It'll come back. But I would say from a life coaching perspective, what kind of led me to life coaching was, tools, using the tools that are available. And that's something I think that's so crucial. We get our checklist that tells us this is what you need to do to prepare to retire. And sometimes on that checklist, the soft skills, the things that you really need to tap into and that show up after you've retired, right? That's that shock and awe once you're retired and you get triggered. I think I got triggered one time sitting in the airport and they were calling for those that were active duty to board the plane. I wouldn't have thought something like that would trigger me. But as I'm sitting there, I think that was July. That was in July and I retired June 1st of 2022. So the first week of July, I was flying for work. And as I'm sitting there and they start calling for the folks that are active duty to board the plane, I was like, wow, that's not me anymore. And I'm like, oh my goodness, just that feeling, and that checklist that they give you, it doesn't account for things of that nature. Are you trying to figure out who you are in this thing called life or how you want to show up next? And so for me, as I was trying to go through the process, trying to figure out, I worked with a therapist because I thought I wanted to be a mental health coach or mental health therapist. I'm sorry. So I worked there in trying to make sure I showed up for my clients in a way that was whole and healthy. I worked with a coach, and in working with the coach, and I also did, I think you talked about Commit. I did work some with Commit, but even before that, before I worked with Commit, I was trying to figure out, like I said, who am I and what my values are. And so at a friend's suggestion, they suggested I do a program that they saw and they were like, check this out. And as I started checking out the program, it was a coaching program. Although I didn't pursue that particular coaching program, it started my path down really thinking, is coaching something that's for me? And as I enrolled in a coach certification program and I worked with a coach, I'm like, I reflected over my military career. And it's like the things about my career that made me come alive were coaching skills. It was being there for my folks if I saw them, whether it was a peer, a subordinate, or a superior. Being there and seeing, what was their experience like on a daily basis? What goals were they working towards? What challenges were they having? And just watching them navigate that and being able to, number one, show up and say, hey, how are you? Right? Check in with them because you could see what was happening. And also letting them have a space to be able to express what was happening. To kind of state maybe how they wanted things to be. And then definitely as being an accountability partner, following up with them and saying, hey, how are you? How did that go? And at the time, that was what I realized. That's what made me come alive about my military experience. And at the time, though, I didn't know that was coaching, but I learned that was coaching through the process. And so as I did that and I learned, okay, this is what makes me come alive about my military experience, which is what led me to coaching instead of just, going to, I know like the placard that would have gotten me a lot of job offers, right? And for me at the time, that wasn't something that was fulfilling. It didn't make me come alive. But this coaching thing, it made me come alive. So that's what led me to coaching.
That's where you and I are so similar. You mentioned soft skills earlier. I retired as a colonel in the Air Force in charge of 500 people and $2 billion worth of airplanes. And when people ask what I enjoyed most about it, what I enjoyed most was seeing those around me succeed, whether that was young folks getting married or making good financial decisions or teaching them how to lead their organizations beneath me. I just found it so satisfying to see those around me succeed. And so it just seems like a perfect segue into that coaching world. So when I was going through the Commit Foundation, which just life-changing experience, I think it was 5 or 6 sessions. And Jason was my coach at the time. And they really started to pull out the areas that the skill sets that you've developed during your military career that you want to carry on with. And I said, well, this skill that I have of photography, no one in the military taught me. I just happened to bring my camera with me everywhere I went on all these missions all over the world. And so I started taking all these pictures, and the folks that I'd fly with, they said, man, this stuff's pretty good. You should do more of this. And so this photography and this podcasting and this veterans awareness, it's all kind of come together with the coaching and the photography. And so that never would have happened if it wasn't for the Commit Foundation and for coaches. So I have such tremendous respect for you and the coaching community, because it's almost like mental health, where it comes across as something that's negative, and it's the exact opposite. It's unbelievably positive and motivational. So that's my kudos to you. Thank you so much for doing that. Now, you are on your own in this coaching journey. You've stood up your own company. Can you describe what you're doing?
Sure. So at TWS Coaching and Consulting Group, we help professionals and veterans achieve work-life harmony, and we help them turn their challenges into opportunities. And of course, the way we do that is through coaching. We do leadership coaching, relationship coaching, and mental health coaching. Then we also we facilitate skills workshops, things like self-awareness, stress management, mindfulness, leadership, empowerment. And then we also attend speaking engagement. And so that's the way that we facilitate those services for our client. And yeah, I think that answer your question as far as
yeah, absolutely. So that transition from military command structures to entrepreneurship, obviously that can be challenging. Can you describe a moment when your military leadership experience proved particularly valuable in building your own business?
That is good. I think the first thing is that realizing that I'm not alone. Although I am a solopreneur, I'm not alone. I do have a network of coaches, as well as other networking communities that I'm a part of. And so I would say the first one is just, as a military, we're taught to look out and to see where our support, where our helps are, and tapping into those networks. So I would say that was the first one, is being able to tap into those networks and realize that I'm not alone. If I choose, because sometimes, of course, right, we might choose to be alone, but the easier road is if we go together, right? I think that the quote that says something to the effect, if you want to go fast, go basically by yourself. If you want to go far, you go with a team, right? Go with others. And so definitely realizing that was a big thing for me. And also I would say from my military experience, realizing that the military gave me structure. And that's what I loved about it, was the structure that it gave me. And now in this phase, of course, I always go into something, and if there isn't structure, right, which a lot of times it's so broad, you have to kind of figure it out, doing the best I can, or doing what I can to put structure in, so that then I can move from just surviving to thriving. So definitely I tap into that every day. Every day I tap into that.
I look at coaching as like service, whether that's serving at your church, serving in the military, serving in police, fire, nurses. I feel like it's service. Can you give an example of someone that you've coached that's been the most satisfying to you?
That's good. I've had many, and I still continue to have many. But I guess one that kind of sticks in my head, and I think she's been one of my clients for the longest. She just came into it. She's in the education industry, and she came to it, and there were so many things that she wanted to accomplish, things in her career, and she just felt like she didn't have those things at her disposal, or she didn't know how to move forward. Like I want to do something different, but I don't even know where to begin, how to move forward. And so seeing her come in with those challenges of not knowing how to move forward and desiring to move forward, and just not realizing that a lot of the answers to her questions she already had. And so we worked together for about a year. We worked together for about a year. And in fact, we're re-engaging again as she's been promoted and in a leadership position. She's enjoying it, but of course it comes with its challenges. But just seeing her use the tools that she learned while we were working together, that's, I guess, what lights me up. Seeing the little things in between each session, but then seeing it over the long haul, and how it moved her to our first coaching session to where she is now. Like you said, it lights you up, and it makes me come alive. It makes me continue to coach when I see that.
If someone is listening who feels stuck right now in their career or their personal development, what one piece of advice would you offer them today?
Definitely, I would say reach out to a coach. And you're not in it alone. Reach out to a coach. And most coaches will give you a sample session or a discovery session. I call it a sample session, in which you show up to that session with whatever challenge you had. And they'll kind of work with you so you can see what it might be like to work with them. And it's typically complimentary. And I know for our audience, I think it may be predominantly veterans. There are different organizations out there that offer coaching at no cost. One of the programs that I'm a part of right now, the Veterans Coaching Project, is a prime example of that. The whole thing with the Veterans Coaching Project is they're trying to get you, whether you're recently transitioned or you're in the process of transitioning. And it's not only for the veteran, it's also for spouses and caregivers. And what they do is they help you discover what your values are. They help you do that work. They help you with the interviewing, get to practice interviewing. And there are other things. And then they help you decide whether or not you want to go on and be an entrepreneur or if you want to go to corporate. They're there to help you with that. I would also say stand beside them is also another nonprofit. And they also provide coaching services for veterans, caregivers, and spouses. So I would say you're not alone. Reach out, try coaching. Yeah. I'm sorry.
That's okay. That's what I love about LinkedIn. I try to share my experiences, whether that's headshots or helping them build their page or explaining their military resume in civilian terms. And I love that giving back piece. So have a relationship with coaches is so helpful. And so now this coaching path is your new mission. So what does success look like for you in this new mission?
That's good. That's a good one. What does it look like for me? I guess it's, to me, just getting that tool of coaching into the hands of as many people as I can, because I realize that historically, a lot of times it's only given to those at the executive level. However, I feel that anyone can benefit from coaching. I know we hadn't talked about it, and is it okay if I take a moment to make sure they're clear on what coaching is?
Absolutely.
So coaching, you're not a therapist, so the coach is not there to diagnose you, right, and give you this treatment plan, right? The coach is not a consultant. They're not there to come in and say, here, this is how you solve your problem, right? Use this. The coach is not a mentor. They're not there to say, this was my experience, and this, take some nuggets from this and feel free to use them in whatever way that works for you. With the coach, number one, you are the expert. You're the expert on your life. So the coach is coming in. They're there to be your accountability partner, right? They're there to give you that safe space so that you can have that conversation that you've been having in your head. You can have it out loud. And from a neuroscience standpoint, it's just something about when you're able to vocalize what you've been having going on in your head, it gives you some clarity that you never knew existed. And what the coach does is they allow you the space to be able to do that. They may mirror some things you share. They may also make you aware of some patterns they're seeing in what you're sharing. And so just knowing that a coach is there for you, and it's empowering because it's not about the coach. It's all about you and the fact that you already have all the answers. You just need the space to be able to unpack that and then develop a plan to move you from where you are to where you want to be.
Oh, wow. I'm excited. I'm pumped up. Wow. That's pretty cool. Charles and I going to school together in class together. I had no idea that he had such a amazing spouse who's probably kicking him in the pants and keeping him in line. And so I'm so thankful for having the chance to have a one-on-one with you. So I always ask a couple questions for folks before I sign off here. If you were to talk to that 17, 18-year-old Shikina back in the day, what would you tell her about what her future is going to look like?
Oh, I love this. What would I tell her? So you're on the right path. Just keep moving forward. There will be times when it's tough, but when those tough times come, draw towards community instead of away from, and you're going to get there. You're going to have everything that you've imagined and more. So,
Our youth today seems to be so individual. They don't seem to have that community, and that's what I love so much about the military, and that you have this community that comes from all over the globe, of different cultures, different races, different sexes, and you come together towards one common goal and one common mission. And my wife always teases me, here he goes again on his recruiting campaign, but I will advocate for anybody to serve, because it was the greatest decision and greatest experience of my life, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. So for you, I typically ask if there's one thing that I haven't asked that I should be asking before we sign off.
Wow. I think you've been pretty thorough. I think you've been pretty thorough. Other than definitely wanting others to definitely know how to get a hold of me, because I would, like I said, if you haven't experienced coaching, yes, there's complimentary sessions. We can talk through what that might look like. But experience coaching, make sure you experience it. And I am an Internationally Coached Federation credential coach, so of course we're going to use the coaching standard. But at the end of the day, just experience coaching. It's a tool you'll never know the value of until you actually experience it. So if you don't schedule a coaching session with me, at least follow me. I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Instagram, and I'm also on Facebook. You can use Shikina Tellis for LinkedIn and Instagram, and then for Facebook, Shikina Tellis 6. But please follow me, reach out to me. I'd love to have a complimentary sample session so you can experience the power of coaching.
Shikina, thank you so much for joining us today, and I cannot advocate enough for coaching. Like I said before, the Commit Foundation was life-changing for me, and I look forward to seeing you continue your career and prosper in this coaching world, because I can just see the passion coming through the screen, and I look forward to hearing more about your successes. So thank you for coming on today.
Thank you for having me.